So, yesterday we looked at when we had an A and a B, correct? And that was a vertical stretch and a horizontal stretch. And if our A was negative, it would be a reflection in the x-axis. If our B was negative, it would be a reflection in the y. Nothing changes, okay? The only thing that changes with actual transformations is vertical translation and horizontal translation. They don't call it that. They call it a vertical displacement. No, you didn't. You better not be blinking. Okay. Fine. Vertical. Wow, that's large. Vertical displacement. So they'll say like vertical displacement, 5 up, 3 up, whatever. They use the word displacement. And they use horizontal phase shift. This is the only unit that they don't call it translation. So in any other unit, exponentials, logs, everything like that, they will actually use translation. It's only this unit that they use vertical displacement and horizontal phase shift. So I ask myself, is this with the x? Is the 3 with the x? No, so it's a vertical displacement. If you're good at transformations, this lesson will be stupid easy. Vertical translation, 3 up. Vertical displacement, 3 up. Translation. What's the mapping? XY becomes, where does that 3 get added to? The y. So I'm going to get x comma y plus 3. Oh, don't forget to grab your test back there. Okay, so I'm only affecting the y's, am I not? So would that affect my amplitude? My amplitude is my vertical stretch, right? It's how tall it would be. Would it actually affect how tall it is? No. Would it move it up or down, the whole graph? Yes. But would it actually affect that amplitude? No. The only thing that affects the amplitude is the vertical stretch. So that's not affected. I'm going to put an X beside it. Is the range affected? Am I moving it up or down? Yeah, so my range is going to be affected. What about the period? How do I find the period? The amplitude in this case is 1, right? The period in this case is, my B is 1, my period is 2 pi or 360, okay? So you have to remember that period does not start with a B, so it's not period, right? And this is actually B equals 1, right? We know A equals 1, which means our amplitude is the absolute value of that, so our amp is 1. We know our B is 1, which is not a period, right? A, amplitude, that works. B, period, doesn't work. So we have to use the formula, which is either 2 pi over B, so 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi, or 360, right? So has our period changed, though? Our normal sine and cosine graphs are 2 pi, right? So it didn't change. What about the domain? The domain is XER. Did that change? No, nothing you do to XER can change XER. What about the x-intercepts? If I'm moving this graph up 3, is that going to change my x-intercepts? Yeah, it's going to move them. What about my y-intercept if I move up 3? Yes, I'm going to move it up 3. So these both change. How can we do the range? Remember, same rule. So our max is our d plus our amplitude. Our d yesterday was always 0, correct? Remember our equation for sine is y equals sine or cos. Y equals a sine b. You need to have a 1 in front. X minus c plus d. It's the same letters as before, right? We just have that sine and cos in it. It's actually at the bottom of your formula sheet too. The 2 formulas in the bottom of the formula sheet. Okay? So our d in this case is what? 3, right? It's not 0 anymore, is it? It's actually, our sine graph moved 3 up, correct? Our sine graph normally looks like this. Let's pretend it's symmetrical. And normally, yesterday, our D was 0. So it cut the graph in half at here, right? Now the whole thing's moved 3 up. So now my midline, which is what this is, my midline is at y equals 3 now. Did my graph amplitude or anything change? No, I'm still going to be going like this. But does it change my range? Yeah. So the D, you can write this for yourself up here as something to remember. My D equals my midline. Or my median value is sometimes what it's called. So the midline is y equals D. The median value would equal D. It's just the line that cuts the graph in half. I should say horizontal. Cuts the graph in half. So the line that cuts my graph in half in this one is 3. And then I have an amplitude of 1, correct? So if I start at that middle line and I add 1 to it, I'm going to get 4. So if I start at the middle line of my graph and I add my amplitude, which is half the distance, right? I'm going to get myself to 4. And how do I find my minimum? Take that midline, the D, and I subtract my amplitude. So I'm going to get 3 minus 1, which equals 2. That's a distance from 2 to 4. What's that distance? How far is it from 2 to 4? 2. And the amplitude is half of it. So does this make sense? 1, 1, 2. Yeah. So my range, now that I got my min and my max, my range, I can just go y such that 2 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 4 y-er. And that's in set notation. In interval notation, it would just be 2 to 4 close bracket. And you have to be able to do both, right? Because we don't know which one they're going to ask us. Interval's obviously easier in this one. Y equals cos x minus 2. What are we happening? What are we happening? Good English. What is happening? Is that 2 with the x or not with the x? Not with the x, so it's a vertical displacement two down. My mapping would be xy becomes x comma y minus 2. So all my y's are moving 2 down, my x's are staying the same, correct? I want you to give me the range. So you find the min and the max. Give me the range. What's my amplitude on this one? Still 1, because there's nothing in front of my cos. So you give me my range quickly. Could I type these equations in my calculator and look for the range? Could they give you a question like this on your diploma and not give you numbers but give you the variables? Yep. So we don't want to just bank on our calculators, right? Also, you can type them in your calculator wrong, so it's better if you can do the knowledge without your calculator, but you can always check with it using the zoom trig function. This whole graph's below the x-axis. How is that possible? It's a normal cos graph. Cos graphs start at 1, 0. So normal cos graph looks like this. Negative 1 to 1, right? If I take that whole thing and I shift it down 2, it's going to be at negative 1 to 3, right? Which makes sense. So we have to be able to visualize our graphs, right? Sine graphs start at 0, 0, go up to 1 and down to 1. Cos graphs start at 1, 0, start at 1, go down to negative 1. But they max out at 1 and negative 1 unless they're stretched, right? Vertically, or have an amplitude change. All right, so my range in interval notation will be negative 3 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to negative 1, y-er. Or in interval notation, negative 3, negative 1. So that's set notation, this is interval notation. What happens in this one? Is that 3 in front, correct? Which is a what? Vertical stretch. By a factor of 3. Still doesn't flip, right? All the y's never change. As long as you have a new y equals. About the x-axis. And I have a vertical displacement to up. My mapping, look at my x here. It's the same, right? Nothing's happened to it. So xy will become x. That's not going to change. And then these affect my y's, and they never change, right? Y's are awesome. They never flip. Even in words, mapping, nothing. So we get 3y plus 2. What can I pull off of here? This is my a value. What does my a value help me get? My amplitude. Because my amplitude equals the absolute value of a, and in this case it's the absolute value of 3, which is 3. What's the amplitude on a base of my parent function for a cos or a sine? What's my amplitude? The y equals sine x and y equals cos x, no transformation. It's just a 1, right? So this one changed. It got taller. It's for now a distance of 6 from min to max, right? Because amplitude's half the distance. Okay. What does this 2 give me? What does the d give me again? Do you remember? D equals midline. So I'm going to say my midline, and because it's a horizontal line, it's a y equals line. My midline is at y equals 2. Is it asking me for any of that? No. I'm just trying to, what information can we pull off of here? Can we get the period off of this equation? Yeah. Has it been horizontally stretched at all? Nope. If there's no horizontal stretch, what's my period? 360 or 2 pi. So we know the period of this equals 2 pi or 360 degrees, right? Didn't change, because you have to horizontally stretch it narrower or wider to change your period. Make it repeat. So did the amplitude change? Yeah, what is it normally? 1, it's now 3. Is my range going to change? My range is normally -1 to 1. Is it going to stay the same? No. Can I plug this into my calculator and look at it? Go in degree mode, press zoom trig, and I can see it? Sure. The range is going to change. Is the period going to change? Still 2 pi, no horizontal phase shift or horizontal stretch. The domain, nope. The x-intercepts. Remember, x-intercepts are a number and 0. Are my x-intercepts going to change? Trick question. What's happening here? If we just multiply by 3y, would my x-intercepts change? Nope. But because we're adding 2, do they change? Yes. So the moment you have a vertical translation on there, your x-intercepts and y-intercepts are going to change because you're moving it up too. You may stretch it or whatever, right? But people will tell me it's not because my y is 0. The moment you have a vertical or horizontal translation, your x-intercepts and y-intercepts are changing. So both these are immediately changing. Now my maximum equals d, which is 3. Nope, that's my amplitude. What's my d? 2 plus 3, which is 5. And then my minimum is 2 minus 3, which is -1. Do you want to know what's sad? People will go a minus d, a plus d on the diploma and on the unit test. It's not. It's out of alphabetical order. It's da. Has to go in the order da. Like you're a rapper or something. Like bro, da. You know, has to go in that order. Has to go in the order da, not add. That's weird. No one cares about that. Let's go dat. D plus A, D minus A, and then my range will be y such that -1 is less than or equal to y, less than or equal to 5 y or -1, 5. Does any of this change if I change this from a sine to a cos? The only thing that changes is the graph will look different because it's shifted. Remember, a cos graph is just a shift of a sine graph. That's all it is. It's just a 90-degree shift of it, or it's just a shift of it. So if I put in sine or cos, it's not going to affect my amplitude or my period or any of that stuff. It'll just affect my x-intercepts and my y-intercepts because it's a shift. But we can type that in. All right, we're going to flip to this one. So I have a 1 in front. I don't have to take the 1 out, correct? Still same rule. I need to have a 1 in front of my x or my horizontal shift is going to be wrong. A horizontal translation. In this case, horizontal phase shift. So this is going to be a horizontal phase shift. Pi over 2 to the what? To the right. So I have x, y becomes x plus pi over 2, because I want to move pi over 2 to the right, and y. Did my amplitude change from original? What's my amplitude on this one? What's the amplitude? 1, because my a value is 1. What's the period of this one? It's 2 pi. Why can't it be 360? Because this is in radian measure. The moment they give us a C, we either know if the graph's in radian or degree, because your phase shift is horizontal and your x-axis is either in radians or in degrees, right? So your phase shift gives it away. So the period of this one is 2 pi. We don't have a choice. My amplitude of this one is 1, because it didn't change. What's my midline? Y equals what? 0, because I have a 0 at the back. So if my amplitude and period don't have a number in them, they're 1s. But if my C and D don't exist, they're 0s. Right? Like this would be a plus 0, not a 1 at the back, but it would be there. So did my amplitude change? No. Look, it's all affecting my x's, right? So my amplitude didn't change. Did my range change? Is my range affected when I move pi over to the right? No. Did the period change? It's still 2 pi, isn't it? It didn't change. Did the domain change? When it's XER, does anything affect that unless I restrict the domain? Nope. Would my x-intercepts change if I move pi over 2 to the right? I would take everything on the x-axis and move it pi over 2 to the right. Yep, they would change. Would my y-intercept change? If I had something on the y-axis, would it stay on the y-axis? No, it would shift pi over 2 to the right, so it would change. So whenever I have a horizontal phase shift or a vertical translation, both x and y intercepts will change. I don't even have to look at the rest of it to know they're going to change. Because I'm shifting them right or left, I'm shifting them off of their axis. Completely off, or shifting them to the right or left, or up or down, right? Okay. What about this one? What occurs? Well, if you want to, you can do this. You can put this in a full set of brackets if that makes you happier. Whatever falls between the sine and the theta is your b value. Whatever falls between the sine and the theta is your b value. So we have a horizontal stretch by a factor of horizontal always coming out of that equation flips. It's never not flipped. It's never not going to flip. It will always flip, right? By a factor of 2 about the y-axis. This equation is in degrees, because my C is in degrees. I have a horizontal phase shift 30 degrees left. My mapping, I would have x, y becomes, if I'm stretching by 2, I have 2x, and I'm moving 30 to the left, so I'm going to minus 30 degrees, and then a y. We're going to go to the equation and pull off all the stuff we know. What's my amplitude from this equation? What's the amplitude? The absolute value of A, correct? And what's A in this case? 1. So my amplitude is 1. What's the period? Period is 2 pi divided by B, correct? Every B so far in this lesson has been 1. So it's been either 2 pi or 360. If this one, am I going to go 2 pi over B, or am I going to go 360 over B? 360 over B because my C is in degrees. So I'm going to go 360 divided by a half. When I divide by a half, it's like multiplying by 2. So I get 720. Does that make sense? My normal graph is 360. I'm stretching it by 2. So now it's going to be 720. That makes sense, right? It normally takes 360 to repeat. I'm multiplying by 2, so now it's going to take 720. My midline, what's my D? 0. So my midline is at y equals 0. So what is my amplitude for this one? Did it change? No, it's still 1. What about my range? Is my range going to change? My D is still 0, my amplitude's 1. 0 plus 1 is 1, 0 minus 1 is 1, negative 1, so my amplitude's not going to change. What about the period? Did it change? Yeah. You have to remember from an equation that B gets you the period. It's not called the period. You will tell me that the period is whatever the heck the B is. It's not, right? B helps you get the period, but it doesn't give it to you. You have to fill it into 2 pi over B or 360 over B. The domain didn't change. My x-intercepts, are they going to change? What about my y's? Yeah, I have a horizontal phase shift. The moment I have that, both of these are changing. Does that make sense? This is what we start tomorrow. Equations. This is the hard part. Coming up with equations from a graph. It's not horrific. You just need to really bring your A game tomorrow. You'll do well on it, but you just need to really bring your A game. And then we just have, after this, we have tan graphs, but not really. They're just very minimal. So they don't make you draw tan graphs. And no problems. Then we're done. So we'll be done this unit Friday. Move on Monday, Tuesday, you write the test Wednesday. We move on to more Trig, so it's not like we're moving on to something totally different. So this is section 5.2. So your homework is page 250. When it says sketch a graph of each function, I want you to sketch one graph. I want to see if you can actually sketch it. Okay? That's all I want. You don't have to sketch it for every single function. You need to figure out what the vertical displacement is for each one. But I want you to sketch one graph. So you can practice going from your calculator and see if you can sketch it. Okay? Tomorrow will help you because we're going to go from a graph sketching to an equation. But just try and sketch one off your calculator. So, number 1, C, D, F. Number 2, C, D, F. Number 3. Number 5 is the matching. And that's it. Tomorrow we go from words to equation. So like I say, vertical stretch by blah, 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 horizontal shift, blah, 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 all that stuff. And we go from graph to equation. So tomorrow is words to equation, graph to equation. Okay?